Every man has his heroes, and every life is made up of stories. Heroic Stories is a series from heroicmen.org to find out why some men choose the harder path in life, even when it means losing everything, how they survived, and who they are today. These men seem heroic to us, even if they don't call themselves that. They seem to have an extra strength in their system, extra grit to battle doubt and find purpose. All of these men are seeking divine friendship with God, and they all believe in building up faith, building up men, and building up our future. Sponsored by CatholicSpeakers.com and hosted by Dominic from Heroic Men, get the mindsets, the scars, and the playbooks that these men have earned the hard way. Heroism isn't born, it's made, and these are their stories. Hi friends, and welcome back to Heroic Stories. I'm fortunate today to be joined by Bill Moyer, President of the Catholic Men's Leadership Alliance. Bill, welcome to the show. Glad we finally got you on.
I'm glad to finally be on. It's been a crazy busy year.
Yeah, we're gearing up for another one, which is kind of the point of this conversation. You have a new year, new you line of thinking, which I think is going to be very, very helpful to get into. Before we get into all of that, I do want to run by our normal set of questions by you about how heroism makes sense to you, how you are seeking this idea or ideal of heroism in your own life. And that's what we're showing up for as listeners, is to understand how it makes sense to you. We've had a pretty incredible series of recordings for season 3 with our partnership with Catholic Speakers Organization. This is definitely going to be one of the earlier ones that's coming out to set the tone for everything. And invariably, people jump on and they say the same things like, oh, I'm not a hero, or heroism has been co-opted by all the wrong sorts of people today, and we need to get back to what real heroism means. And sometimes it's very simple, and sometimes it is incredibly heroic. And it's wonderfully valuable to get a bunch of different men to sit down and talk about what are the stories that light them up. So let's start with that. A story of heroism that lights you up. Could be maybe from your own life, or perhaps from the news, or somebody you've met, or a story that you absolutely love. What's a story of heroism that lights you up?
I'm kind of a simple guy in a lot of ways. It's one of maybe the best compliments someone ever gave me many years ago in business. He said, you have a unique gift of simplifying complexity. And what he meant was that I could take complicated things and put it down to maybe a third grade level. So I felt pretty good about that. I was kind of filled with pride, like men get sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I went home and told Rose, my wife, and I said, Paul just gave me one of the greatest compliments. He said, I can simplify complexity. And she said, yes, you are very simple-minded. Wives sometimes have this great ability to take the pride out of us and humble us just a little bit, or remind us to go back that it's not us at all. So that's, to me, when I look at being a heroic man, and I look, a heroic man, you don't have to save people from burning buildings and do all kinds of things. A heroic man is a man who gets up every day and understands a couple of things. And this has been life-changing probably in the second half of my life, when I turned away from living in the world and living on that journey to be a saint, which is what a heroic man is, on the journey to be a saint. So a heroic man, in my desire to be that, has something simple. I love my wife more than I ever thought I could love anyone. 47 years later, I still look at her like the very first time our eyes met. I still look at her that same way. But today, I don't look at her and see the most beautiful face, the most beautiful person. I see the most beautiful soul, because I don't look at her. I look into her soul, and that connection. And the reason we have that kind of relationship is I have a very unique wife, but probably not as unique as we think, because my wife understands that she's the second love of my life, because I love God with all my heart, all my mind, all my soul. And then Jesus' command was, love as I have loved you. And that's what being heroic is. So I love my wife the way Jesus loves me. So she can't be first. And I was a good husband before, for many years before I came to the Lord. And we'll talk about that maybe in a minute. But it wasn't until she wasn't first, until I stopped trying to please her in every way. What I did instead is love her and see her the way God sees her, and try to love the way I'm loved in that same way. And the most heroic men I know are that simple in their faith, because the world doesn't tell you that. The world tells you have to have fancy gifts. You have to have those kinds of, you have to do all of these great things. And it also lies and tells you in the world. I've been in the leadership development business. This is my 40th year, so a long time. But when I first learned that, when I was first introduced to leadership development and goal setting and all of those things that have been my career since, they told you, you can have anything you want, do anything you want, be anything you want, if you're just willing to pay the price. And I bought that lie. I bought that life by working hard, providing for my family, giving them everything they could ever want, everything that I never had. I was working so hard in my past, running away from my past of growing up in an alcoholic, abusive environment and being estranged from my father, all these kinds of things. And I said, I'm going to give my family a better life. That's what men try to do. We say, I want to give my wife, my kids, a better life, but we buy into the world that tells you that. But when they tell you, you can have anything you want, do anything you want, be anything you want, if you're willing to pay the price, what they don't tell you is that the price you pay is your soul. And I woke up one day, as part of my story, at the height of my career, 1987, of my career, the greatest material success I've ever had, winning a world award as one of the top people in the world in my business, in my industry, receiving that award that I killed myself for. I mean, I worked like no one's ever worked before to achieve the height of that, and flew from Pennsylvania, where I was from, outside Philadelphia, to Austin, Texas, close to where I live now, for this international conference where I was going to receive that award. Left my 3 kids and my pregnant wife at home because she couldn't travel, to share the joy of that big victory. And when I received that award, it was the emptiest feeling I've ever had in my life. Empty feeling because I thought, I killed myself this year. I became what I today challenge men. I became Uncle Dad to my kids. So Uncle Dad to me is that good guy that comes home, enjoys their kids, comes to visit, brings gifts from all the places he's traveled because he's never home. And each time make it a little better gift so they're more excited for him to come home. That's what an uncle does. That's not what a dad does. But I was buying into that light. It was the emptiest feeling. And I started to reflect. I went out and took a walk that night, challenging in my mind, why, whenever I get what I want, why is it never enough? So then I just go back and I do more and more and more, and work became my God. Success became my God. My wife, we were married 10 years. We had a great life, the house of our dreams. We had pretty much everything you could think you would want. She was happy. I thought I was happy, but something was missing. And what I found was missing as I took a walk that night. I was confronted by a homeless man on the streets of Austin, just taking a walk middle of the night. Won't give the whole story. You can come hear that or read it sometime. But sat talking to this homeless man that entire night, and he was asking me why I was just wandering and why I looked so lost. Now, here's a homeless man, asking me that question. And I told him about winning this award, how hard I worked. And I told him about my alcoholic father and how I didn't want my kids to be anywhere near him and just didn't want to have anything to do with him because I didn't want my kids to know. Told him about the shame of growing up that way and how I wanted a better life. Told him about growing up and the disappointment, another disappointment in my life, and why I'd walked away from the church, walked away from faith because I had a confirmation teacher who kind of lit up my life, the best teacher ever, even to this day, that I've ever had in my life. But in the middle of my confirmation year in a Lutheran church, in the middle of that year, this guy left his wife and his kids because he was having an affair, and he later married his 23-year-old assistant, and he was 45 years old. And after that, I walked away from the church, and I said, if is what being a man of God is? I was 13 years old. That's what being a man of God is. I don't need any of that.
Yeah.
That I don't need any of that. I can do better on my own because every man in my life had disappointed me. My father, who was an alcoholic, a lifetime alcoholic, who was abusive to my mom and to us. And everywhere I looked, that was the case. So I made a decision that day when I heard that, 13 years old, that if I was going to make anything good in my life, it had to be up to me. And I built a pretty good life. But this homeless man, that night when I shared that whole story, and during the same time, he told me his story about how he had been living on the streets for 3 years, that he had a pretty good life, but lost his job, and it was real tight economy, and he just couldn't find another job, and it got behind in his bills, and he started drinking. And then just his life just fell apart. His wife told him to leave the house because of his drinking and because of all the things that were happening. And he had been on the streets for 3 years. But he looked at me, that man, that night in 1987, and he looked at me and he said, you're never going to be happy. You're never going to be satisfied until you go home again. And I said, so let me see if I understand what you're saying. You're a homeless guy, and you're telling me to go home. And he said, you know where home is. Back to the time in your life before that teacher disappointed you, when you knew real, because during that time before that, my life started to make sense in the middle of all the chaos with the abuse in my family and everything else. And so for some reason, I said to him, I'll make you a deal. When I go home, back home to Pennsylvania, I'll go back to the church if you'll go home to your family. And he said, there's no way my wife would take me back. And I said, well, where do you live? He said, really not far from here. He said, I've always been on the streets, hanging here. He said, in fact, I even go to my kids' school sometimes where they can't see me, and I'll watch them out on the playground and all of that. I've stayed close because I wanted to stay involved. But my wife, the way I treated her and all that I did, that's unforgivable. She's not taking me back. It's middle of the night. And I said to him, I just won an award for being the best salesman in the world. Can I call her? And he gave me the number, and I called his wife.
Okay.
And 30 minutes later, she came and picked him up and took him home. And when I went home after that, next morning, literally a few hours later, I took a flight home. I went back, joined RCIA, and Holy Saturday 1988 came into the church and changed my life. That's my second half. That day, that moment when I received Jesus in the Eucharist for the very first time, Holy Saturday 1988, at that moment with my wife standing with her hand on my shoulder behind me, was the first time in my life that I ever experienced true intimacy, one with God and one with my wife. And we've been on that journey ever since that time for the last 37 years, coming closer and closer and closer. So that's what being a heroic man is. A heroic man is realizing that what we're called to do, it's very simple. July 8th, 1978, when I said I do, what my vows meant is from that day forward, I was responsible to get my wife to heaven. When each of our children were born, from the day they were born, I was responsible to get them to heaven, not to point to heaven, but to walk them to heaven every day and to be that model. That's heroic. That's what a heroic man. So I might have a house full of old trophies and awards and great things. I get compliments for things I've done in business. None of that's heroic. That's just me using gifts and talents and abilities and things that God gave me to start with, because it's really, really not me. Heroic is walking away from the lies of the world and walking in the light, not living in the shadows, not living in the darkness, walking in the light. And my life has changed forever. A good friend of mine said to me many years ago, and it was an interesting thing, a very wealthy friend. And we had been meeting for a while, and he didn't really know the Lord at all at that time. And he said, you're one of the sharpest business people that I've ever met. And he's known a lot. And he said, I don't understand why you're not a millionaire. And I said, I am. And he said, well, you don't live like a millionaire. You drive like a regular car. I've been to your house. You have a nice house, but it's kind of a nice, typical middle-class house, comfortable, nice place to raise your family. He was trying to be complimentary, but he was really saying I didn't have any of the things that he had.
Right.
And I said, oh, you're talking about money. I thought you were talking about richness. I said, I have more than anybody you know. He said, I'm married to the love of my life. I have a personal, intimate relationship with God. I got the best kids, not the most perfect kids, but I got kids that God has entrusted me to raise. And I have everything that I could ever hope for, everything I've ever dreamed of. The rest is just stuff of the world, and none of that matters. So the only thing I care about money for is how I could use that to help somebody else through a tough time, because what else do I need other than that? That was the beginning of his new journey at that time, and didn't realize it. So when I said that, I meant that. That wasn't just those kinds of things, because when I looked, all the other stuff of the world really doesn't matter, because when my final day comes, none of that gets to go with me. But what I leave behind are the seeds that I planted in my wife, in my kids, and every young person 14 years before my working ministry to men, the last 20 years, 14 years youth ministry, serving young people, because that's how God uses us. So I look and I think, how does God use a simple guy like me? The same way he uses all of us. So if we want to know what is it that God's calling us to, what's the purpose in our life? First, what talents and abilities, what gifts has he already given us? We a lot of times use those gifts for the world rather than those gifts to serve him for his glory. So what gifts? Then if we look back at our life stories, we look back in that second stage at our life stories, what have we been preparing for? Because every single event, every single learning experience, good or bad in our life, it's been training camp for what we're called to do with the rest of our life. So this kid growing up who walked away from the faith because he was disappointed by a father who failed his family, who was raised by a father who failed his family, was called to take the gifts that he had and those life stories to spend 14 years helping teens in youth ministry, spending time with kids who were struggling with those same things. After those 14 years, took what I learned from that period of time, because he then called me to go serve men and to tell men what their children told me about their fathers. Not just what I learned, but what I learned from their children, and to challenge them to be the man that God calls us to be. So last part of my story that I'll put on, it was the real game changer, is just before the Saturday before Holy Saturday, 1988, for all of the candidates that were catechumens that were part of our group, we had a retreat, and there was a deacon leading that retreat. We had a lot of small group. We had to present and talk about our past and all of that. And at the end of the retreat, the deacon asked me what I stayed. He wanted to talk to me afterwards. And I have to tell you, I never do anything halfway in my life. I was so on fire when I finally said yes. When I went to those classes every week, I would come home, I'd raise my hand 100 times during the class. I drove the catechist crazy because I had so many questions. And I'd come home and my wife and I would talk about those things, because she's cradle Catholic school her whole life and all. And I'd say, did you know this? Did you know this? Did you know this? And I thought I had done everything. But that deacon said he wanted to talk to me. And he said, I want you to pray about something, because I don't think you're ready to come into the church yet. And I said, what do you mean I'm not ready? I've done everything you've asked me to do. For the last 9 months, I've come every week. I've been the first one there, was the last one to leave every week. I did all the homework, read all the books, even read things you didn't ask me to. I'm about as on fire as anybody could be. And he said, no, I'm not denying that. He said, you've been a really good student. So you've learned everything that you thought you needed to know. But let me ask you this. How can you stand before God and say yes? Because he called it, I still use that because I was later for many years was the RCIA director in my parish. So I still use the term. He said, you're going to say amen when you receive that sacrament. You're going to say amen. And amen means, yes, I believe. But your confirmation is the big amen. You can't give it back. You're saying yes for the rest of your life. And how can you say, I believe, with bitterness in your heart for your father, because you're forgiven as you forgive? So he said, so we're not going to deny you the sacrament, but I'd like you to pray about that and come with a pure heart and forgive your father. And that's a man. So when I think of that was heroism from that deacon to challenge me like that, because it would have been easy just to say, boy, you've really come a long way, and be kind of excited about that and reassure. But he said, there's something more deep inside of you, and you're not giving your whole self. All you've done is wall off all of those old feelings. So you're going to put new wine into those old wineskins. So I did the hardest thing up to that point that I'd ever done in my life. First, I had to go home and tell my wife and kids why I didn't talk to my dad and why I didn't let my kids see him. They just thought I was mad at him for something growing up or whatever. But I had to tell them why and how I had carried that. My wife knew that it was kind of trouble, but she didn't know the depths of those. So I really had a conversation with her, and I then sat down, wrote down what I wanted to say to him, and called to make sure he was home. And we had this little code, my mom and I, because whenever I wanted to come and bring the kids, I didn't want the kids to be there when he was there, because I never knew what he was going to be like. So I just he needed to be gone. So I'd always call her. And this time I called her and said, is he home? And she said, yes, but I'll ask him to leave. And he was pretty good. He would leave if he knew I was coming bringing the kids. He would just leave, because he knew it made my mom happy that she got to see my kids. And I said, no, I don't want him to leave. When I get there, I'd like you to leave for a little while. I just want to see him.
I bet that was surprising.
And she said, in a whisper, she said, you're not going to kill him, are you? So that tells you what our relationship was.
Okay. Wow.
And I sat down with him after she left, took a deep breath, reached in my pocket to pull out what I had written down that I wanted to say to him. And it wasn't there, what I wrote down. Somehow there was a card in my pocket, but it was blank. And I picked up the wrong one when I left. Instead, I just looked at him, looked him straight in the eye. And I said, I can't imagine what your life must have been like to have hurt people like you have, to hurt all of us. I can't imagine the hurt you suffered that would make you that broken. But I just want to say something to you. I want you to know, no matter what, that I love you and I forgive you. And I want us to start over. And my dad, who was a big, strong, powerful man, cried like a baby. And from that day on, for the rest of his life, a lifetime at least third generation alcoholic, never drank again. My kids then got to know the grandfather that was the man that my father, that was like the father that I wished I had. And I got to know him in a different way. And then God blessed me in a really powerful way, because my dad lived 5 years after a diagnosis of 6 months with cancer, fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting, not because he was afraid to die, but because he wasn't finished reconciling with everyone that he hurt. And I got to sit alone with him, holding his hand when he took his last breath, and I got to walk him home. So when that homeless man said, you won't be happy until you go home again, part of us going home again, Jesus didn't say, come home. He also said, walk others along home with you. So I got to walk my father home into the arms of Jesus. And being heroic for the rest of my life is about me reaching out to every man that I encounter and trying to move them just one step closer to home, just by loving and seeing them the way God sees them. And that's why we do the work that we do. It's why Catholic Men's Leadership Alliance was formed. It's why Heroic Men exist, because Heroic Men is not a platform. It's not an app. It is all of those things. But what it really is what our mission is: to call men to be heroic, to call men one man at a time, using all the tools and resources that are available out there, and to pull all of those together as the alliance that we are, to pull all those things together so that we can go out and challenge men one man at a time and call them to be heroic. Not to call them to come and be part of, to sign up and join a club, to commit to be the man that God created them to be heroic. And you'll hear more as we launch this new year, because we're in an exciting time. We're at the end coming up in January. On January 6th is when I say what coming on January 6th. I said that to a group not too long ago that I was speaking to, and they said, that's the anniversary of storming the Capitol. I forgot about that, but no, that's not it. But it is going to be the anniversary of when we storm the gates of heaven, because it's the end of the Jubilee, the Epiphany, the end of this Jubilee, 2025. So for the next 25 years, beginning this year, January 6th, it's new beginning of a new you. to be the man that God calls you to be. And we're going to roll out, and you'll hear about it more and more, all kinds of ways for you to commit every single day until the next Jubilee, or in my case, until my own Jubilee, which is not going to be 25 years. I'm too old. If I add 25 years on the who I am, I hope I'm already home by that time. But for every single day, called to be heroic, called to be the man that God called you to, and not just take your wife, your children, your brothers, your parents, but everyone that you encounter, to walk side by side and lead others to that satisfaction that the world never, ever gives us. Because all it does is give us the lies of the world, ladders that we climb that lead to more ladders, and enough is never enough, and we'll never be fully satisfied until we take the greatest act of heroism and say yes to God and say, I am third. God first, others, including my family, second, and then me. Because it's not about me, it's just about him. And if we can be that kind of man, then we're heroes. Long answer to a short question, wasn't it?
No, it's a good answer with a lot of stories in there. And I have a lot of questions, and this show can't go on forever, so I got to try to pick a good one for you. Part of the New Year, New You thing. Everybody starts a new year with New Year's resolutions and so on. We all drop them after a couple of weeks. What have you found? No, what's a better way to say? What works for helping men to build something like a new identity, not just a new habit to stop this, stop that, start new things? Heroic Men and our alliance, and you're my boss, and so we meet every week, and we're always talking about this sort of thing. We're trying to help men understand and see, as you've just said, there is a specific calling and a path that each man can take that is almost unique to each man. They have their own gifts, their own abilities, and that's why this show is so fascinating, because each man comes on and tells their own stories, and they have their own tasks and paths that they're following. But a lot of us aren't even beginning. And we will try, and we will, New Year's resolutions maybe, or some event breaks in and forces us, like a force change or something, to think different. But then stuff doesn't stick. So when we, for example, say, or you're getting up and saying, it's a new year, you've got to get it together and start the new you, because you don't have forever. What have you found works in all of your time coaching men, consulting with men, where stuff does stick?
I think one of the things I've learned, and I've spent my career kind of teaching that, what the statistics say is that New Year's resolutions, by about the 17th or 18th of January, they're long forgotten. If you buy the best business to have, there's one particular business where you only need a big space for a couple of weeks and you make all your money in January, and that's a health club. Mm-hmm. Because everybody's just going to get physically fit, get in shape. So they buy 1 year membership to a health club, go once or twice. The regulars, the ones that get it, that understand physical health, stay away during those couple of weeks because it's too crowded. And then they go back and they have the gym all to themselves.
Yeah.
After that. That's what New Year's resolutions are, because first, it's not really a resolution if there's no resolve, because you have to be resolute in that. So the real key to New Year, New You, we learn in some of the most successful programs that exist. There's no diet that's lose 30 pounds in 30 minutes. You got to do the work. One day at a time, make choices, backslide, get back and start it again. Alcoholics Anonymous, any of those 12-step programs all have the answer to that. One day at a time. So it's one commitment at a time, one day at a time. And if you miss what we do, we miss once. We say, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pray. And we start off this way. So somebody says, I'm going to improve my prayer life. I'm going to pray 1 hour every day. Well, you probably have prayed other than memorized prayers at Mass. You probably have prayed 1 hour last year total. So that's too much. But if you say for 5 minutes every day, I'm just going to sit in a chair and just pray. Not pray and ask, I'm just going to sit and just listen. It's pretty simple. You can go and do it. But instead we start this big and you start this big, one piece at a time. And pretty soon, that couple of minutes that you commit to, don't even worry if your mind wanders, if you go off in 100 different directions, because eventually a stillness will come in your heart, that peace that you're searching for, and that'll be the time that you look forward to the most. And pretty soon your 5 minutes of mind wandering will be 30 minutes or 40 minutes, and you'll long for that. And that's true of almost everything. What we try to do is we live in that microwave instant gratification world where we want everything now. Instead, just enjoy the greatness of the little things. Greatest lesson Jesus gave us is just stop, take a deep breath, and just enjoy a meal together. Because what did they all say? We got people to see, things to do. We got to keep going. We got to push on. Now we're done for the day. Let's just sit and talk. Let's just sit and share a meal together. So pick a handful of little things. And we're going to, as part of our mission, going to be laying out a whole series of small little commitments, one at a time. Because what we're going to be looking at and what we need to do is not a New Year's resolution that's made, a promise made to be broken. We're going to make a series of commitments. If I ask, what's the definition? Commitment. People give these long answers. Jesus gave us the definition of commitment because they were, in his last words, it is finished. So what you say you're going to do is only a commitment if you do it. So you're not going to make a promise. We heard that old promises are made to be broken. Commitments, you can't commit. So my kids growing up, when I was raising them, they'd say, I promise I'll do better. I promise I'll do this. I promise I'll do that. And I'd always look at them and say, I don't want your promises. I want a commitment. Commitment means it's finished. So I'd rather, if you're supposed to clean your room, I'd rather you say you're not going to do it than say you are and not do it. So my question is, not are you going to clean your room? Are you making a commitment to clean your room? And that sounds simple when you look at that. So commitments have to start small. So if I said, make a commitment to clean your room, and it looks like most kids' rooms look like my office looks like half the time, and you say you're going to clean, we're not called to every now and then do a total clean out. We shouldn't go to confession and clean out the clutter in our lives and all of the sin once every 5 years or so and get rid of it, dump it all at the same time, because it builds up slowly and slowly. We're really called a little bit at a time. So start small and build off of small series of wins, and then it'll get to be more and more and more. And then you'll wake up one day and there'll be a new you, but it's not like a flash, like a burning bush, and then suddenly, bam, everything is totally different. We look, and then someday somebody notices and they say, wow, there's something about you. There's just something different. And that's the journey. So that's what we're really going to look at, not miraculous overnight instant gratification, not go have the tape of the month club, the video of the month club or whatever, not have any of those kinds of things. A series of small commitments by the power of all the tools and resources that we have available, and forming alliances and partnerships with the very best things that exist in the world and offering those to everyone who makes that commitment to be a heroic man.
Like I said, I have so many questions, and I wish we could go back and dig into more of your personal stories and the lessons that you've learned. I think two questions I'd like to close with. One is the spiritual life, your own spiritual life, and the habits that you practice that keep you sane and keep you on the level. Before we get to that, let's close with that one. Before that, I'd like to ask you, what are your as the boss, the president of our alliance, what is it that you're hoping we can accomplish? What are you looking forward to with Heroic Men and our allied partners of the different ministries that we're working with? What do you hope we can accomplish in this new year?
It's very simple. We've spent this past year refocusing and organizing towards harnessing what exists around the world. Back to our roots of being that Catholic Men's Leadership Alliance, using the power of Heroic Men. So the Leadership Alliance is helping to form leaders. And as I said, I've been in leadership development 40 years. For 40 years, you know what we call it in the faith? Disciple making. You're a leader if you go and make disciples. That's our mission. Because all we are is a consumer. If we're just a disciple, we've received that. But Jesus called us and challenged us to be leaders, to go and make disciples and send us out. So we're going to accomplish touching leaders of groups all over North America and beyond by sharing the best of the best resources for leaders through our partnerships and alliances and the things that we've created. And then it's to reach through that pledge, that commitment to call and reach what eventually will be 1 million men and more. Okay, now, not necessarily next year, but how would we reach 1 million men? We could get a list of 1 million guys, 10 million, and maybe 1 out of 10 would sign a pledge to go and do it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about through our partnerships and our alliances with the best men's groups that exist all over the country, and with the Knights of Columbus, and with That Man Is You, and with all the retreat groups that are out there, all of the things that are designed to reach men, by us partnering with all of them through their groups and sharing our resources and the things we have, and asking those group leaders to challenge their men to make that commitment, that pledge, to be heroic. So it's not a club of heroic men. Every single group, including Knights of Columbus, you can't be a Knight of Columbus and sign their pledge as a Knight of Columbus and make that commitment without making a commitment to be heroic, to live where I am third, where God's first, and then family and others second, and then me. That's what being heroic is. So we want to reach 1 million men, and that sounds like a monumental task, but if we total up all the men meeting in men's groups already in the United States that we've been able to identify, the groups at least, every Knight of Columbus, every person into That Man Is You, and on and on and on. If we take all of that, it's many more than 1 million. If we look at that, we're just going to ask guys who are showing up already, that are committed to show up at some group or go to their men's conference every year or go on their Acts retreat or whatever their thing is. We're just going to ask them to go one step farther and to commit to actually be that man that somebody else is challenging them to be. And just to say yes. And that's how we'll strengthen the man, and then strengthen the family, strengthen the church, and strengthen the church, transform the culture. That's how we're going to live out those simple words, that simple mission. But it's one man at a time, but through the leaders of those groups, by us challenging them to challenge their men.
It's an exciting mission. Closing question then is, what are your spiritual habits, practices for maintaining that relationship with God that keep you sane? I'm sure you've tried a bunch of different things. What's stuck? What are your go-tos?
A couple things, simple, and it changes every year, but the core things are the same. I start because I focus on God first, so I give Him first fruits of my time. Not if I have time today or later before I go to bed when I'm ready to go to sleep, I'm going to say my prayers and talk to you first thing in the morning. Sometimes if I wake up during the night, I have those personal conversations, but I don't do anything else in the day before I give at least 5, 10, 15 minutes of quiet just in His presence. So that's one. That's simple thing. I stay in the Word. I'm taking something every day. So I've done some things, some different series and different things, but just really studying the Bible and reflecting on that. I pray Liturgy of the Hours with my wife. That's been a game changer for us. For now, we're probably on our 6th year, 3 times a day, morning, evening, and night prayer. We struggle for a long time because masculine spirituality is really different at that way. And it was hard for us to find a rhythm. We both prayed a lot. We sometimes said some prayers together, but to find that rhythm, we found that rhythm in us praying Liturgy of the Hours. And we use the one that we get from I think Ascension or whatever, an orange book, and it's written out simple, because before flipping those ribbons back and forth in Liturgy of the Hours, that would make my brain just explode. Yeah. Now it's so common. We go back and forth and we pray that together, sitting with each other, the night prayer in bed before that. And the other ritual that's part of our life is that when we go to bed at night, we pray Chaplet of Divine Mercy. I have a great love for that. We go to sleep with that, because the last words on our lips before we go to sleep, the last thing that we say, and we listen to it. We have it played, so we listen to it, so we can do that in the dark, that we go to sleep at night. Jesus, I trust in you. Jesus, I trust in you. Jesus, I trust in you. And then we can rest in that peace with that trust. So those are just some simple things. And then the last piece of that, it's going to be part of our challenge to men next year. Many years ago, I wrote a rule of life. Rosa and I, my wife and I, did that together. We're both spiritual directors trained in our diocese, in the Diocese of Austin. So one of the activities, we had to write a rule of life, and I wrote mine. And we meet once a month, and I review my rule of life. It's my life statement of who I am, who I'm working to become. And I ask Rose to give me feedback about how I'm doing. And I'll share that. We'll do another one of these sometimes, and I'll share that, because we may do one sometime in the future, just talking about that. It'll be part of our commitment for men to write that. But we share that and ask how I'm doing. It has to do with the kind of husband, father, leader, all areas of my life, simple statements written of who I aspire to be. And I want to know how I'm doing when I look at that. So anyway, that's a lot more that I could share, but simple things. As I said, if you start at the beginning, you can't do something for an hour that you can't do for 5 minutes. So try to do, and one good holy hour, if you can squeeze it in every week. I used to say, I have the greatest holy 5 minutes you've ever seen. I just was there an hour, but now my holy hour feels like 5 minutes. Where before, the holy hour, the first 5 minutes felt like an hour, because it was really hard to settle down and let go of everything and just be fully present. And that's why it's a little bit at a time. You got to start. You have to start where you are, because Jesus meets you wherever you are. You don't have to go to him. He's right there. You just got to make that step and reach out. So he's okay if you give him 5 minutes in your holy hour.
So last question for you. Over the last couple of years, since you've been working with this alliance and with Heroic Men, and now you're presiding over it, what's your favorite story from the last couple of years, something that's happened through your involvement with Heroic Men?
Well, so I could think of so many, but I think one of the stories, and it's a good friend of mine, and I'm really kind of proud of this guy. Some of our guys will know him. Mike Kelly is his name, and he was our regional leader in Region 10 for Catholic Men's Leadership Alliance. But I met Mike. He goes to my church, to my parish, and I met him there. And he worked at a company where I knew that I had worked with a long time and knew. And we got to know each other pretty well, started to have coffee. He started to come to our men's group. And this is a guy that his wife had died, was married, but in a marriage where his wife, it was just a real challenge. You think he was just searching for something, became part of our men's group. Next thing you know, he's part of our men's group. Then he's on our board that meets once a month, and as part of that, then the next thing you know, he's retired and he's the executive director of our Central Texas Fellowship of Catholic Men, traveling all around the diocese, helping men's group get started. Next thing you know, he's now grown into being the regional leader for Region 10 and being probably the best regional leader we've ever had, because he started at the very beginning, working on his own journey, meeting with a small group of men every week, faithfully going and doing that, then stepping out and taking and introducing that to other men in other groups and inviting, then diocese-wide, then Region 10, and then on a national basis, now retired and just doing it one person at a time and doing amazing things. So I would say that might be the best story, because that began my relationship with him. One man walking with another man in the beginning of his journey started with a cup of coffee. Because Mike said, "Would you mind having coffee with me? I'll buy." And so he took me for coffee. Now, I will share something. He took me to Whataburger, which is nationally, people might not know it, but Texas and somewhere beyond that, you would know about that. But the reason he chose Whataburger, because we were going for coffee is free if you're a senior citizen. So he bought the coffee. So we both had our free coffee, and he got free advice. And we just sat, and I asked him questions about his life. He asked me questions about mine. And we went from just being two guys searching for what God was calling us to in our life, that came from similar backgrounds in business and in other things, and got to know each other. And now we're brothers. And he's done incredible things. I remember there used to be an old commercial, "I want to be like Mike." And when I think about him, that I want to be like Mike. So I have many, many more stories about that, but I just saw him this morning, and that's why that was the first question. So I kind of like to challenge men to be like Mike. Go invite somebody to coffee, find out what their story is, share your story, and commitment that two brothers are going to walk together for a little while and then go out and change the world.
Thanks for joining us. If this story connected with you, send it to someone. And if you want to chat with us about anything that we've said, send us a message at heroicmen.org/stories. Our partner at CatholicSpeakers.com has built the easiest way to book powerful Catholic speakers for your men's event. They are the #1 resource worldwide for event organizers and Catholic speakers. Book easily, confidently, and ask for several grants to support ministry to men. Visit heroicmen.org/speakers today. Come and share your journey in the Heroic Brotherhood, our online community for Catholic men like you. Get the app with the best Catholic media for men, including Heroic Men's original series, Be a Man. It's all free, because an alliance of donors already paid it forward for you. Stand with us. Let's build the future of Catholic men. Will you pay it forward? $5 a month pays it forward for 5 men. Visit Heroic Men to stand with us. Because men like us, we leave no man behind. Visit heroicmen.org today.